Chris.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself and tell me what
Yeah,
you
I'm
do?
Chris Church. I'm running today's training session, and I've run several of these for Every Action Counts, and I've been involved in Every Action Counts since its research phase a couple of years ago.
Okay. What's the purpose of today's workshop?
Today's workshop is to train up people from the Brighton and the South East area to become community champions, working with local community organisations.
Okay. Who are the people who are attending today's workshops?
It's a very mixed audience, from fairly radical activists who've been involved in things like the climate camp to an older guy who's living in sheltered housing. And there's a couple of people from local government, but most of them are community activists.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the game that they're playing today?
Yeah, at the centre of this is a game to help people develop an action plan. We offer them a set of 25 cards, all of which have different actions on, and they sort them out into things they're not doing yet, things they've already done, and things they could do. They take the things that they could do and the things they haven't done yet and put them on the game board then and decide which of them are the highest priorities. Each person gets one vote, so the things that are more popular get moved up a level, and the most popular ones will end up in the centre of the game. Those action points that all the people in the group think are most important can then be used for the basis of the action plan. So if they come up with 3 or 4 priorities, they've got an action plan.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other workshops that you've run?
Well, these have been very varied. I did one last week for Every Action Counts, which was just with 12 people in one London borough. They were local community champions already, but they were keen to build their skills and go out to talk to more groups. They'd been recruited by the council to help build recycling rates. So that's a slightly different approach. And we'll be doing another one next week with refugee leaders. People from refugee groups working across London with very, very different life histories, very different ideas about their environment, I'm sure. So that will be quite an interesting one. But most of these are quite simply people who come along because they are engaged with a local community group and want that group to do more on their environment.
Okay. What does Every Action Counts mean to you personally?
Every Action Counts to me is something that will help overcome the split that I think has sadly developed in Britain between environmental organisations on one side and social, voluntary sector and community organisations on the other. Both sides are interested in our future. Everyone's got a stake in their local environment, but too often a lot of the social groups have thought, well, the environment isn't really something we have to worry about. We've got to worry about poverty or housing or social justice. All those issues are tied up with the environment, and a good environment provides the basis for a good community.
Okay. How long have you been involved? Sorry about that. I'll edit that bit out. How long have you been involved with Every Action Counts?
Well, I was involved in doing some of the initial research for Every Action Counts about 3 years ago. I worked with the Community Development Foundation, and we did a piece of research on the potential involvement of the voluntary sector and community sector in work on climate change at exactly the point when DEFRA, Department for Environment, were interested in this same area. So they took CDF on to do some research, and we spent a lot of time going around talking to the national organisations, National Council of Voluntary Organisations, Action for Communities in Rural England, Development Trust Association, and so on, about what they would be interested in doing on the environment, why they weren't doing much on the environment so far, and how they could be helped. And of course a lot of those groups said, well, we have a whole set of priorities already. We are funded to do certain things around developing social networking, or training people, or tackling housing problems. And we don't have much resources to do the environment, but also we don't quite understand what we might be able to do. Every Action Counts has been able to provide a little bit of resourcing, but more importantly I think it's helped people target where they can work with their local networks to build engagement.
Okay. Has Every Action Counts led you to change the way you do things personally?
Yeah, I think I'm in a state of constant learning. I meet community groups who are coming up with bright ideas. it's encouraging me to certainly continue thinking about how I can cut my own carbon footprint, and also it improves how I work with communities.
What's been the most successful part of these workshops?
I think, very hard to say really. I think it's actually the sessions where we work with people on tackling difficult questions. Now these may be difficult questions that are being asked by the community, or simply the difficulties of working with with community groups that aren't very involved in the mainstream. Sometimes people talk about hard to reach groups, but actually those groups exist. They're usually meeting in a place once a month or something like that, so they're not that hard to reach, but it may be quite hard to engage with them. And I think one of the encouraging things about this is working with community champions to get on so that they can go and talk with groups they might never have thought about engaging with. Doing it, some we've already done. Yeah. So what I'm going to invite you to do is, anyone here working with a community group at the moment? You're a group.
Yes.
Okay. So one of them could be an environmental organisation. Your group.
Yeah.
Okay. We need someone else to be a group. And the other. Okay.
The board, yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're the board of the housing group. Okay. So we're going to have one pretty much social threat community and one environmental, and I will split you. And what you're going to do, you're going to go through these, saying whether your group is doing them, or whether they're not applicable, yeah? And the others can advise you how to get into role of being part of.
I'm making the decision because we're doing things that the group aren't doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm Patrick McTurnan. I'm a resident of Ribbits House in Hurstpier Point, and I'm a board member of Downland Housing Association, which I have been since July last year.
Okay. And how have you come to be involved with Every Action Counts?
I'm on a few subcommittees, one of which we had a meeting about 18 months ago, and volunteers were requested to attend a lecture, which I did, and I've registered with the organisation, so I get emails, and recently got the one saying that this was taking place, and I contacted and said I wanted to attend. And I believe the benefit will be for fellow residents in Ribbits House and throughout Downlands Housing in due course.
Okay.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 not doing it yet. Right? You might want to add in on our way to doing it. And what you do is very simply put these around the edge. Boom, 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 boom. And why not add in the on the way to doing it? We haven't actually done it yet. Now, each of you goes around the table in turn and has one vote. It might actually be 2 votes because you're a smaller number. And so if you think that that one is really important, you don't have to move any of the cards. You can just leave them where they are. But if you think that one's really important, you move it up one. And if you think that one's really important, you move it up one. And then Karen comes around, she thinks, oh yeah, that one's really good. No, I'm not so. And that one's interesting. Yeah? So you end up, you all go around the table, and you all move up the ones you think are most important. If they're
I should